Let's get nuts.
Well,
All
Mark,
right.
probably everyone who's watching this knows you well by now anyway. So I suppose just to get straight into it, because it's a mad time in the world, and I know it wouldn't be your area of expertise, or maybe not, but the latest stuff with Charlie Kirk has kind of, I mean, we may not ever really know the truth. I mean, if they told us 100% of the truth, how would we know? How would we even know at this point? But the what we have seen is the mask really not even slipping. It's been taken off by the left. There's a lot of really crazy videos out there of people openly celebrating that assassination. What do you think about that?
I'm tending to stay away from politics and current affairs stuff. I have been for quite some time. I used to get involved in all this stuff and comment on it, particularly during the COVID era. I had a whole lot to say about stuff that was going on then. But in more recent times, I've just really zoned out from all of that. And this kind of ties into my thoughts and my viewpoints on the true nature of this realm. So, alongside my music industry stuff, I've been doing a series of videos lately, which I'm calling my God videos, where I'm just asking big questions about what is this place? What are we doing here? What force or entity created it? To what end? What's the purpose of it all? And I'm so focused on all of that that I'm tending not to focus on the fine detail of all this stuff that's going on. And one of the reasons for that is because we seem to get a psyop a week these days. And if you're someone that's going to absorb yourself in the fine detail of all of them, it's going to tie you up in knots. It's going to completely confuse and confound you, lead you off down about 500 different garden paths. You're going to fall down about 5,000 different rabbit holes. And if you've got other things that you need to attend to in your life, all of that is just going to divert you from it. So when it comes to the Charlie Kirk thing, I've not really looked at it in a major way. I have looked at a few videos that people have sent my way. Got to be honest with you, I'd never actually heard of the guy prior to last week. And to start with, I was a bit kind of embarrassed about that. And I thought, oh, should I have heard of this guy? Am I sort of, really out of touch? But I went to a conference at the weekend, like a truther conference. And I was asking people about him there. And most of the people in attendance at the conference had never heard of this guy prior to last week. And yet now he's a household name through apparently having been assassinated. So this smacks to me of being a psyop, because anyone who gets this level of interest and media coverage, that will never be by accident, and it will never be a grassroots natural thing. I've seen so many of these now over the years that when everyone is talking about something or someone, it's a very clear indicator that it's the product of social engineering and it's a psyop. So my personal view is that this event is a psyop and that it's being used to further certain New World Order master plan agendas. And my personal opinion, and many people may disagree with me on this, but from having seen the videos that I have looked at, it seems to be a fake event.
Wow, wow. Um, yeah, it's well, it is one of those things like when you hear that the FBI are assisting local law enforcement. We know that the FBI are also assisting us in not finding out anything about Epstein's Island and that kind of carry on. We know these agencies really can't be trusted now, so it's not really it's not going to inspire you with confidence when you hear that they're taking over the investigation, or when they produce results, you're going to always be
Right.
very skeptical. I know a lot of
Exactly.
guys. I mean, it's funny how Alex Jones, like you would think he would be really questioning it as well, but he's going all in it as well. And I know you'd be fairly familiar. You know David Icke. He would be kind of taking your side of it, I think, on that one as well.
Mm. Well, I'm happy that there are people that do dig into these things because it is needed. People need to apply forensic scrutiny to the videos and the footage and stuff and take it all apart and look at the symbolism as well. I mean, part of what I've seen is there's loads of Freemasonic symbolism. There always is with these events. It's like a little calling card, a little memento that the perpetrators like to leave behind to let you know who was behind this thing. There's 33s everywhere encoded into the event, and the dates and stuff, and numerology, gematria, all of that stuff figures. And there are researchers that go into all of that. And the general consensus seems to be within the community that I operate in that it was a fake event and it's been used to further various agendas. So, as I say, I tend to stay outside of all of that because I think a lot of it is designed to entrap researchers, to be honest. It is designed to tie us all up in knots and to keep us away from other things that might be more important or more relevant at a particular time. If everyone's looking at one particular event, it's keeping them away from looking at all kinds of other stuff that needs looking at. So I think that's often an element to these events as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that works in the people's favor is, especially nowadays, with everyone has access to social media, and there's always some pool of people that are looking at all types of information, like, so even though the Charlie Kirk thing could have been used as a psyop, there's always a branch of people out there that are looking at different other events that are happening around the world. So I think that's one of the good positive things that's coming from modern day, I suppose, social media, the way the communication can travel that way. So um yeah, it
I
is
think it's a
mad.
case of people need to kind of stay in their lane. So if you're an author, researcher, public speaker, podcaster, whatever, if you're someone that specializes in a particular subject area, like for instance politics and current affairs.
Mm.
I mean, one guy that does a great job of that is Patrick Henningsen, who's part of UK Column. He's been around for years and he used to have 21st Century Wire. I think that's still going. And he's great at all that. And so he stays in his lane and that's what he does. I'm known for doing the music industry research, and more recently, I've started to get into cosmology and theology and spiritual questions. That's what I do. And then you have other people that get into natural health and personal sovereignty, standing in your power, this sort of thing. You have other people that talk about MK Ultra mind control and ritual abuse and stuff like that. And I think it's important that we do all stay in our lanes. So if we're specialists and we know a lot about a particular subject area, we've just got to keep charging through with that kind of information and not allow ourselves to be deviated too much from that
Yeah.
path, because we all bring important parts of the picture to the table. It's very important that you have people talking about natural health. I know very little to nothing about that, but I know a whole lot about the music industry and occult symbolism and mind control and things of this nature. That's what I bring to the table. And when you have a whole group of people all contributing their own individual efforts and bringing that to the table, that's when the big picture starts to form. So we have to not allow ourselves to be distracted too much from what we do best.
Yeah, I think that's good advice because I swear I've dipped my toe into every subject, and like you say, you can go down 500 rabbit holes, and I feel like I'm more confused now than I was 15 years ago.
There you go. You're doing something right.
I know. So I guess we could get into some of the stuff that you enjoy talking about and that you've researched. But I was thinking about celebrities and how they're created, and often you see like many of them have parents who are from the military background and things of that nature. And sometimes I heard someone saying that presidents aren't elected, they're selected. And I'm wondering, would you agree that a lot of these celebrities might actually be selected from very young age and maybe groomed to be specific, I suppose, influencers in our society? So if they can maybe sing, we'll make them singers. If they can act, we'll make them actors, and then they will promote things that we need them to promote down the road.
Well, exactly. This is the main premise of my latest book, which is titled No One's Dad's a Plumber. And that title has confused a few people. They're like, what do you mean no one's dad's a plumber? My dad's a plumber. He may well be, but you're not a famous rock star, are you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so the title of that book is inspired by the observation that in so many cases, I'm not saying every case, but in a lot of high profile cases, if you look at some prominent musicians, and this also applies to Hollywood actors and maybe TV presenters and professional sports people even, you find that their dads didn't have the regular working class jobs that you might have expected them to have. So particularly when you get into heavy metal bands, punk bands, new wave bands, because of the way those genres are presented as being anti-establishment and very gritty and very raw, I would have expected to have found plumbers, builders, dockers, construction workers, lorry drivers, among the dads. But it's in very few cases you find that. What you do find is high-ranking military roles like governors, lieutenant colonels, admirals, generals, and then governors, politicians, lord mayors, this sort of thing, judges. And this is a very strange thing. And I'll give you one good example as a result of the digging that I did for the current book. There is a particular educational establishment in England, just south of London, called Reigate School in the town of Reigate. And this is where a number of famous people were turned out. So they include David Walliams of Little Britain, the comedian, Romesh Ranganathan, who's allegedly a comedian as well. But the two that I've had my eye on are Norman Cook, better known as Fatboy Slim, the superstar DJ and producer, and also our current Prime Minister in England, aren't we lucky, Sir Keir Starmer. So both of them attended Reigate School at the same time, in the same year, I think. I think they're the same age. And Norman Cook's real name is Quentin. He used to go by the name of DJ Quentox, but when he came out of the House Martins and reinvented himself as a DJ and began that career, he went by the name of Norman Cook because he wanted to sound more regular working class through the Norman than posh public schoolboy through the Quentin. And he actually said in an interview one time that he wished he'd been born working class. He wanted to be, part of the proletariat because he was communist minded, I guess. And I wonder if communism is a mindset that is taught and encouraged at Reigate School, because of course Keir Starmer is a rabid communist, and that's the direction that he's been taking the United Kingdom in. But Norman Cook in other interviews has said that first of all he learnt to play cello alongside Keir Starmer in the same lessons, and he said there was a point where it looked as if they were going to have alternative careers. So Starmer was going to be a musician and Cook was going to enter the world of politics. But of course it turned out the other way. I mean, the idea of Keir Starmer as any kind of musician is absolutely horrifying. But they each went their own separate way, And another example that I've looked at, again, which I've featured in the latest book, is that of David Bowie, real name David Robert Jones. So I've got a piece of footage that I show in my public talks from 1964. And it's an episode of The Tonight programme on BBC One, hosted by Cliff Mitchellmore. And they've got this feature focusing on this group who call themselves the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Long-Haired Men. And of course, it's complete nonsense. But up there at the front, talking to Mitchellmore on this show, is a 17-year-old David Robert Jones. And this is before he's reinvented himself under the persona of David Bowie. And I think that piece of footage was designed to get him familiar to talking to a television camera and to gain a bit of familiarity among the general public towards him. And I've got many other examples of this dynamic, which I've been showing in the public talks that I've done this year. There's a young Jimmy Page who was on TV as part of a skiffle band when he was about 13 years of age. There's a young Gary Kemp of Spandau Ballet, way before he became famous. There's a clip of Mick Jagger when he's aged 15, long before he became famous in the Rolling Stones. I've got a clip of Jim Morrison, before he became Jim Morrison, the iconic rock god, frontman of The Doors. In 1964, he did a commercial for the State University of Florida. And he's there in his college blazer with short hair, looking very clean cut. And he's got his books and stuff. And he looks every bit the university student. But the next year, 1965, he's grown out his hair. He's up there on stage as the front man of The Doors. He's drunk. He's pushing drugs. He's got his shirt off. He's being sexually lewd. And he's encouraging that sort of behavior among the audience because that was the role that had been allotted for him. So I think this dynamic is a very common one, because it's already been decided that these young lads, in these cases, are going to become prominent and famous. They're going to be inserted into popular culture. It might not necessarily be known early on exactly what their role is going to be. Hence why Norman Cook said there was a time where it looked like Starmer was going to be a musician and Cook was going to be ushered into the world of politics. And with the David Bowie example, I think in 1964, when he was 17, it was already known that he was going to become famous and influential, but it wasn't necessarily known that he was going to do it by way of being a rock star. And there was a period where he studied the art of mime under Lindsay Kemp, who was one of the leading names in that field. And it looked like he was going to become an actor. And indeed, he did star in a few films throughout his career. But by 1969, when he'd become David Bowie, it had clearly been decided that he was going to be an influential rock star. And he was for several decades. So I do think these people are selected early on. They're tapped for fame and fortune and prominence. And the roles are then sorted out later down the line. And there's a couple of ways in which this happens. One is if the individual is born into the right bloodline family. So family bloodlines going back many generations, genealogy, ancestry, DNA is a big part of why these people get selected. So new generations of these families that are deemed important are put into these public roles. Again, it doesn't have to be just music. It can be acting, it can be big business, it can be politics, it can be law. Any profession in which these people are going to have an effect on large numbers of people is fair game for them. So that's one way in. And another way in is facilitated for folk who may not come from one of these important bloodline families, but they've demonstrated just how much they want the fame and the fortune. And this is where the Faustian bargain comes in, the concept of selling your soul to the devil for fame and fortune. This is a myth and a kind of trope which has persisted for decades in the music industry. The idea that certain musicians become famous because they've made that deal. They've sold their soul. Bob Dylan talked about this in a famous TV interview, saying that he'd made a deal with the chief commander and he was holding up his end of the bargain. There's this legend of Robert Johnson, the blues musician, going all the way back to the 1930s, who's said to have gone to a remote desert location called the Crossroads, which is symbolic of where this apparently physical world interacts with the spirit world, and you can cross over from one to the other. And the idea was that Johnson, who was pretty untalented at the time, but wanted to become an influential blues guitarist, made that deal at the crossroads with the devil, and he walked away being one of the most proficient blues guitarists ever. And he died at the age of 27, so it wasn't a happy ending, very often isn't. But that's the other way in. So this idea of demonstrating just how much you want to be rich and famous and what you're prepared to do for it. So as far as I'm concerned, those are the two main ways in. And the individuals who are selected to be the trailblazers and the flag wavers in any field or profession are always hand selected. It's never left to chance as to who's going to rise up through the ranks. Nobody achieves that under their own steam without the assistance of the real controllers of organized society who make these things happen and who facilitate these careers.
Yeah, and talking about selling your soul, if you can talk to the average person about it, and maybe people will take selling your soul like maybe signing a contract, doing things that you're not going to like to do, but you're prepared to be used as a puppet, we'll say. But do you, like talking about Robert Johnson, for example, do you believe there's anything actually supernatural possible? Or is there an entity? Is there really a devil at the crossroads who what was that famous was a famous violinist, Pagani, I think is his name, is that right? He was supposed to have sold his soul to the devil, or his mother had sold his soul to the devil before he was born. Do you think there's something supernatural there for real?
I think there is. I think it would be quite naive for researchers to dismiss any element of supernatural, paranormal, spiritual activity going on. So you do get a lot of researchers in the sort of truth alternative conspiracy field who will focus in on the fine detail and the names, places, dates, times of all the stuff that goes on in the world. But that's where they stop. They don't tend to question what sort of reality could facilitate these sort of activities in the first place. So I go a lot further than that, and my research goes into asking questions about the true nature of this realm, what could have created it, what we are, who we are, what we're doing here, what happens when we leave. And I think you need to slot all this music industry research into that kind of axiomatic framework in order to make sense of it. So I don't believe in a singular entity called the devil or Satan or Lucifer, whatever. These are religious archetypes which are there for mass mind control, effectively, which is what religion is, any organized religion. But I certainly accept that there is a force which we might describe as satanic or anti-life, anti-nature, anti-creation. And it's that force which these people are tapping into. That's why all these secret societies exist and these mystery school fraternities to which so many musicians and famous people belong, because they study this sort of occult, arcane knowledge and they teach it to new generations that come into the ranks. So they absolutely believe in all this stuff. They absolutely believe in forces of nature that exist beyond what we can see. So it would be pretty foolish of us to scoff at it and say, oh, there's nothing to that. That's all nonsense, because they clearly know a thing or two about it. And this colours their activities. This is why they employ symbolism. This is why they put little clues and calling cards into everything that they do. This is why they have their assets flashing up these different hand signs, whether it's the Baphomet horned hand sign or the so-called 666 sign or pyramids or covering of one eye. These are all methods of occult communication between those in the know, and it's letting anyone with the eyes to see and the mind to process the information know that this is one of theirs. This is why they do things like predictive programming. So they place into movies, TV shows, cartoons, music videos, advertisements, depictions of real world events which are yet to come. And they know they're coming because they're the ones that make them happen. Or at least those who control these industries, movies and music, are in cahoots, are working in conjunction with the forces that cause these events to take place. So we've just passed the 24th anniversary of 9/11, and I've literally lost count of the number of visual references to what happened on September 11th, 2001 that were placed into movies, TV shows, music videos in the years and decades, because that event was planned 4 decades since the 1960s or possibly even before, that are right there in popular culture. And the reason they put those things there ties into their ritualistic belief system about karmic consequences and all the rest of it. So it doesn't really matter if anyone else believes in that stuff or not, they do. And that's the reason why they put this stuff in there. They seem to feel that they can cheat the ordinary consequences of karmic action, retribution, that would come down upon them if they didn't put the emphasis for what they do or what they plan to do onto us. So they were warning us, telling us that 9/11 was coming for decades before, but they were just doing it in cryptic coded form. So they weren't coming right out and saying, on September 11th, 2001, we're going to carry out controlled demolitions on the 2 World Trade Center towers, and we're going to carry out 2 other events as well and bring down these airplanes. They don't tell you in those specific terms. They tell you in cryptic coded form, often using numbers or symbolism. And as far as they're concerned, they're still telling you. If you're too dumb or too profane or too ignorant to be able to decipher what they've told you, well then, that's your lookout.
That's
you
on
know.
you.
Yeah, they've absolved their responsibility, their karmic commitment, if you like, to tell us what they're doing, and the emphasis and the onus is now on us, the public. So when we don't say no, when we don't say we're not with that, we don't approve of that, we do not consent, you can't do that, they take that as being as good as us saying yes. That's our consent as far as they're concerned. I mean, what other reason can there be for all these different examples in popular culture? Take COVID. as another example. Hundreds of examples of all that nonsense we went through in 2020 and 21 in the years and decades leading up to that event. So they do it all the time. And it's part of their religious belief system, which is all the indication we could ever need that they absolutely believe that there are supernatural, paranormal elements at work in this world. And it ties right into what gets done in the music industry. There have been comments even in the mainstream recently about how satanic and dark many music videos have become, and many high-level, high-profile performances. What about Sam Smith
Yeah.
at the Brit Awards last year? Came out dressed as a friggin' devil with a bloody fork and horns and all the rest of it. They're
How
not even
obvious
trying
can
to
you
hide
be?
it.
Yeah.
They're just getting more and more blatant with it. And the US Super Bowl halftime show is basically an occult ritual. It's a massive energy harvesting occult ritual employing ancient Egyptian, ancient Babylonian symbolism and ritual aspects. And the general public have no idea of this. They watch it in their millions through the television audiences. They're making an energetic connection with all this symbolism, all these icons, all these motifs, which mean something. And they're helping to empower them with their attention because their conscious minds are not engaged. It all goes on in the subconscious mind, which is where all the magic works. That's where symbolism resides. The subconscious mind absorbs symbolism and numbers and codes. But until conscious knowledge of what all that is and what it means is brought through to the conscious mind, you're literally being hypnotized and mind controlled and having magic spells put on you. The moment you bring awareness and knowledge of what all these signs and symbols mean and what these rituals are into the conscious mind, that's when you've broken the magician's spell. And that's when it stops having any kind of effect on you. So that's why I've been bashing my head against a brick wall for the past 15 plus years, trying to get this sort of information out there. And many others have as well. You know, there's many great podcasters and public speakers and authors doing a brilliant job. That's why we do it, because we've got to get knowledge of what's been weaponized against us, because popular culture and entertainment has been weaponized. People think it's just harmless fun. And they think it's just a way to unwind and escape all the pressures and stresses of everyday life. And that's when their guard is down, because they have no idea that that's when they're at their most susceptible to hypnosis and the flicker rate from TV, which literally puts you into a hypnotic state, deep sleep state, or one step away from it. So it's so important to get this information out there. And I think it's every bit as important as politics, current affairs, banking, finance, all the rest of it. It's one that gets missed. It gets missed often, entertainment and popular culture, because people think it's just fun, but it can be very, very damaging to people's lives until that conscious awareness of what's really going on is engaged.
Have you been getting a lot of pushback from figures in the music industry, Mark?
Interestingly, no. I've got a lot of support from quite a few. I've had quite a few household names reach out to me, not massive names, but I don't think he'd mind me mentioning Mike Stock of Stock Aitken Waterman, you know, is on board with all this, and he's been very supportive. Right Said Fred, of course, have been very supportive. I had a conversation with Van Morrison in 2021, who was pushing back against all the lockdown nonsense in COVID. And he put out 2 albums full of songs protesting against all the stuff that was being done to us. And I had a very interesting conversation with him. And he indicated that he was very clued up and he knew what was going on. He knew all about Klaus Schwab and the World Health Organization and what Fauci was up to and what Bill Gates is really all about. And I said to him, would you come on and do a podcast with me? And he wasn't against the idea, but he said, you've got to go through my management company in order to hook it up. So he passed me on to his management company, and of course they blocked it. They just put a gatekeeper there saying, oh, sorry, Van can't do these shows at the moment. They just didn't want him going on a show like mine, because that's not where they wanted him positioned. Ian Brown has had some great stuff to say out of the Stone Roses. Eric Clapton made a couple of comments about his experiences with the arm spears, but he didn't really go any further than that. But in terms of pushback, no, I've not had any emails or any kind of interactions with people that I've spoken about in my books to say, how dare you, or what you've said about me is wrong, or you better watch your back, pal. There's been none of that. I think a lot of these people are going to be aware of what I say about them and what others say about them. And they just kind of have to roll with the punches, because if they respond and engage in debate with somebody like me, it's just going to reinforce or at least bring renewed attention to what it is that was said about them in the first place. And then people will be like, oh, why is this artist getting all upset? What did this guy say? Oh my God, he wrote this. I wonder if that's true. I need to look into this. So they don't want that. They don't want that kind of attention. So they just kind of let it fly by the wayside, and that's fine by me. I don't really particularly want any interactions with these people.
Yeah, I seen one there, a recent, actually, an Instagram video, and it was from Tomorrowland. Now, I was actually at Tomorrowland a couple of years ago myself, and I didn't take any notice of any symbology, but I do presume that if I went back in time to have an eye out, I'm sure I would have noticed something. But in this clip, I can't remember the artist, but it was on the main stage, and you could see the Freemason compass and square in the background, and the camera panned out, and you could see the audience, and the DJ was instructing the audience to kind of like hum to a rhythmic kind of a hum and bouncing from left to right. It was really like I was kind of, it spooked me, to be honest.
Who was the DJ?
I can't remember. It was very big. It was a big DJ, but I can't remember exactly who.
Paul Van Dyke, possibly.
Could have been. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't trust that guy. Yeah, I mean, all these dance festivals now have been turned into occult rituals. Tomorrowland is one example, but there are so many others. And, Glastonbury Festival and these big band-based festivals are really obvious in terms of the symbolism that they put out there. And that's what they're for. And they've stepped up the game. It didn't used to be like this. You could look at Glastonbury from 30 years ago, and they would have had the pyramid stage, I guess, which is symbolic in itself. But you didn't see artists pushing the same kind of symbolism that they are now. And the same with dance festivals. So with every passing year, it seems all the decor and all the backdrops and stuff just get more and more occult and more esoteric. And most people, of course, have absolutely no clue what's going on. They turn up to these dance festivals to get off their faces and enjoy music. And they don't realise that all this stuff is being fed into their subconscious. And particularly when you get into mind-altering drugs. And I'm not saying I'm against recreational drugs per se, but I'm just saying that if you're under the influence of these, you're opening yourself up and making yourself even more susceptible to what may be getting done. It's through the sonics, through the sound. There's a lot of stuff that gets done through sound frequencies, a lot of manipulation there. It's through the visuals, all the backdrops and the decor and, all the logos and stuff, icons. And it's also getting done on a communal basis, because you're getting together with large groups of people. You're pooling your consciousness with these people, and the DJ has a major effect, like you said there. I observed many years ago the absolute power that a DJ can have over a huge number of people at one of these massive dance festivals. And an example I always used to think of was David Guetta. So you'd see David Guetta up there on a DJ podium, and it's akin to a religious ceremony. It's just like being in a big church gathering. So you've got the DJ who's taken the place of the preacher, the priest, and he's up there in the DJ booth, which is the equivalent of the altar or the podium in a church. And then you've got the congregation. And you can have a preacher in a church that says, let us sing hymn number, whatever, and all the congregation hang on that guy's every word. And then in a massive dance festival, all it takes is for Guetta or whoever to put his hands above his head, start clapping his hands, and he can coerce 20, 40,000 people to clap their hands on command. That's a lot of power and a lot of influence for one individual to have over a huge number of people. So I'm sure many of these key DJs, I'm not going to say all of them, but many of the leading lights will be fulfilling agendas in that regard. And they will know what they're doing. And these dance events are used as energy harvesting rituals.
Quite intoxicating for the DJs as well, I imagine.
Well, I know what that's like because I've been a DJ myself. I've never played to those sorts of audiences. I think my biggest audience is probably 1,500 people, something like that. And these days, I mainly play at summer festivals where there might be 100, 200 people. But even with that number of people on that small scale, I can witness the power that a DJ can have over large numbers of people. So I can start clapping my hands behind the DJ booth as I'm playing a tune, and I can get 200 people to do it. And it's quite an uncanny thing. I find that in my public talks as well. I'm up there on stage, and every now and again, I'll just sort of snap out of the presentation mode and just observe. And I've got all these eyes fixed on me. Everyone's hanging on my every word. It's a big responsibility. You want to make sure that you're delivering empowering information to these people because they're giving you their full attention, their full consciousness. And so with that kind of influence comes a huge amount of responsibility. And that's what these DJs bear. That's what these rock stars, these bands bear when they're up there on stage. They're responsible for the way that large numbers of people are going to react and respond to what it is they're doing. So if you've got a malevolent control system sitting atop these bands and these festivals and such, and their intention doesn't involve the upliftment and the betterment of all humankind, and on the contrary, they've actually got a malevolent agenda in mind, which is all about control and subjugation, then that's a potentially dangerous scenario for people to find themselves in. And I always try and make it clear that I'm not in any way advocating that people should stop going to dance festivals, stop going to clubs, stop going and viewing live music, stop watching movies, stop watching TV shows. Life in 2025 would be pretty grim if we didn't have those kind of distractions, and they serve their purposes. You know, they're leisure activities. They allow us to unplug from all the stresses and pressures and bullshit that we all have in our lives, and we need them. I'm simply saying that people need to be aware of what these vehicles are so often used for, the pushing of subtle messaging and cultural conditioning and occult mind control. And once you are consciously aware that these things are used for that, I personally feel, and others may differ, but I personally feel that you've broken that spell and you've disconnected yourself from any kind of negative effect that these things can be having on you. You can watch a movie, you can put it on, you can say, yep, I'm going to see a bit of agenda pushing here. There's probably going to be something in there about climate change. I know there's going to be the odd pyramid or the odd bloody hand signal or whatever, but it's not going to affect me and it's not going to spoil my enjoyment of the surface narrative of this movie. And if you can approach it with that kind of mindset, I think you've diffused any kind of damage that might otherwise be getting done.
Yeah. Just to touch on that as well, we've heard recently there Shane Lynch from Boyzone. He's been fairly vocal about it over the last year or two, about him, I suppose, studying the occult and black magic, dark magic back in the early 2000s, 90s, and he had to pull himself away from it before because he found himself getting too deep into it. And look, fair play to him. He's probably brave for coming out and saying it, like, but he says things like that he has witnessed, I suppose, record producers praying satanic rituals over CDs. Have you bear witness to any of that, or have you heard of many other frequent stories like that, Mark?
I've certainly never witnessed anything like that myself. I was always kind of on the periphery of the music industry, for which I count myself very grateful. So I did want to get into the industry deeper, but I never really managed it. And that's probably a good thing. But I've certainly heard stories from others who've been more deeply embedded in the industry that this sort of thing actually goes on. And what Shane Lynch was talking about there is a modern day reboot of what a guy named John Todd, known as John Todd Collins, was talking about in the 1970s. Have you heard of this guy?
No.
Okay, so he came out of one of these important bloodline families, so-called Illuminati families. You know, Collins is a major name within that sort of arena. And it seems different generations of this particular branch of the Collins family are put into society in certain key roles. And his allotted role was in the music industry, the American music industry. And he worked in various record companies and promotions companies. And for whatever reason, he decided to break free of his family connections and everything that he'd been a part of. I guess he had an attack of conscience, and he became a born-again Christian, like Shane Lynch, and did a series of testimonials talking about the stuff that he'd witnessed during his years in the music industry. And you can get a few of these testimonials online. I think some of them are still on YouTube. They certainly used to be. I've got one that I play in my public talks. And in this particular one, he's talking about an encounter that he had with David Crosby of the Byrds and then Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. He was a very influential musician in the 1960s and 70s. And he said he bumped into David Crosby in LA years after he, Todd, and his real name seems to be Lance Collins, by the way. So he went by the name of John Todd, but that was an alias. His real name was Lance Collins. So he encountered Crosby and he said, I've got to know, David, are they still doing the same thing in the record companies whereby they take the master tape of a new record that they want to put out there in the public, and they put the master tape in a so-called altar room in the record company HQ. And he said all the major record labels had one of these, and they would bring in a coven of witches, and these witches would perform a dark ritual whereby they would cast a spell or a hex on the master tape recording of this new album about to be released. And in this anecdote, Crosby says, yeah, sure, you know that gets done. So this seems to have been standard practice in the 1970s. And this was the analog era where new music was put out in the form of vinyl albums. And the master tapes were analog recording tape. So the idea is that when these witches cast their spell, some of that dark signature energy embeds itself into the recording on the master energetically, and then every copy that's then made of that master tape, and which goes out into the public in the form of vinyl albums, carries some of that dark energy with it. And then people buy albums in the record store, take them home, and they've brought that into their homes. So that's what, according to John Todd Collins, was happening in the 1970s. And Shane Lynch says that he's seen modern day versions of this. So it would seem to be a standard practice that's been in place for decades. And now music is produced electronically and digitally. So we can only imagine the sort of stuff that could be getting stripped into recordings without anybody's conscious knowledge of it being there. It's all on an unseen level. You can take stuff out of recordings, you can put stuff in, and the conscious mind and the human ear has no perception of what's been taken out or put in. So there's the potential for great danger there when you start thinking of things on the level of energy, energetic frequency and vibration, which is a big part of sonic manipulation that goes into mainstream music output. And there's another guy named William Schnurberlin, I think that's how you pronounce it, and he became a whistleblower as well, and a born-again Christian. Born-again Christians sure do like to blow the whistle on stuff they've been involved in. And he put out a book, and he's done podcasts and talks and stuff about his time in the music industry or attached to the music industry. And he says that he was a witch within various satanic covens. And during his time doing all of that, he learned about some of the techniques that are used in the production of rock music and stuff that gets put into those recordings. And it's the use of things like a sawtooth wave and the tritone and these different production methods, which are very discordant to human consciousness when they're experienced. So they can actually put the listener in a state of unease, and it makes them feel very disturbed, but they don't know why. They don't realize it's because of the music that they're listening to. And he focused particularly on rock and heavy metal music. And he said that having been a witch, a sorcerer, he was trained in how to view people's auras. And he said that the auras of people that were exposed to this music were severely depleted because of what they were being exposed to on an unseen level by way of frequencies. And he said that rock music, I think his words were, they literally flay people's souls. That's what he said. So Shane Lynch's revelations tie into what these guys are saying, and I think we've got a trend here.
Hmm. Yeah, I heard one there recently. It was all the buzz when Ozzy Osbourne passed away, and I went down. I didn't really listen to Ozzy Osbourne or Black Sabbath, so I kind of got into that little bit of I won't say rabbit hole, but I was listening to their music for a few weeks, in around the time of that charity gig that they did as well before he died. But I heard stories that I suppose back in the was it 70s and the 80s that people were afraid that Black Sabbath's music was, I suppose, very satanic, and people used to be buying the records and setting them on fire, or I suppose breaking the records, and obviously that was put to Black Sabbath, and Black Sabbath were just kind of laughing, and they'd always say, "Oh well, we don't really care because people are actually buying our music," and it's just kind of interesting because I suppose to someone that doesn't really listen to rock music, and the minute you look at Black Sabbath's work or even their music videos and Ozzy, like he comes across as very satanic, but he does the opposite in public, where he'd be really praising Christianity, I suppose, and saying he's very holy, and he's often said that he's not satanic and that it's just a character that he'd be playing. So do you think that there's a lot of bands like that maybe out there, or that have been out there, or do you think they've hidden agendas?
There was this concept in the 1980s of the so-called satanic panic, and this is where loads of Christian groups in America were accusing heavy rock bands of openly pushing Satanism. And you could make an argument that that simply increased record sales among curious young people that wanted to know what all the fuss was all about. So it could even have been a marketing technique, you know?
Mm.
But the idea of heavy rock bands, heavy metal bands being involved in Satanism and dark occult practices goes back decades. Black Sabbath were probably the pioneers of that in terms of British groups. And then you had groups like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and then a lot of American rock bands that kind of flirted with that sort of imagery. And it's almost become like a cliche within heavy rock that these bands are pushing satanic imagery, and they've got all kinds of dark stuff in their regalia and their decor and stuff. I think with some of them, it probably is a marketing gimmick. It's a way of them just tying into what's expected within those genres. But there's definitely evidence to show that some bands are openly engaging with dark occult ritualistic practices. Led Zeppelin is an obvious one. I've got a presentation titled Dark Occult Aspects of Led Zeppelin, which I've done live a couple of times, and I've put it on my Patreon. And this focuses mainly on Jimmy Page, the founder of Led Zeppelin and the main guitarist, who was fascinated by the world of the occult and dabbled in many practices himself. He was particularly interested in the works of Aleister Crowley, the notorious British Victorian era occultist. And Jimmy Page famously bought Crowley's house, Boleskine House, on the shores of Loch Ness in Scotland, which is where many rituals and seances are said to have taken place. There's all kinds of dark legends and myths attached to Boleskine. And mysteriously, it burnt about 10 years ago. It was mainly destroyed in a fire in the middle of the day, which is still unsolved. So there's lots of strange things about that place. But Jimmy Page bought it so that he could be within a setting that his hero, his icon, Aleister Crowley, had been involved with. And Page is a member of the Order of the Golden Dawn, which Crowley also co-founded. And he's been involved in lots of dark stuff, my research has shown. There seems to be a curse which has followed Led Zeppelin around. This is kind of a rock music trope as well. So their drummer, John Bonham, died at the young age of, I think it was 32 in 1980, of an alcohol overdose. And Robert Plant, the singer, has undergone many unfortunate experiences in his life. He lost his young son, who was 5 years old, in a tragic accident while he was away in America on tour with Led Zeppelin. He'd been involved in a couple of car crashes that he narrowly escaped, that nearly claimed his life. And according to many researchers, this is all down to various activities that Page engaged in, or possibly some sort of deal or bargain that he entered into with dark forces. And it's caused Led Zeppelin to be the subject of some very unfortunate happenings. And with Black Sabbath, I'm putting together a Black Sabbath version of that series. So it's going to be dark occult aspects of Black Sabbath. And I don't think it's going to be difficult to find material. I haven't really started yet, but I'll be digging into some of the early imagery that they pushed and the nature of Ozzy Osbourne and some of the stuff that he was into. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff to find there for sure. But I think Black Sabbath are a group who were pushing occultism knowingly. And probably there were many copycat acts who came along later who thought, oh, this is a good idea. We should push this sort of stuff in our imagery as well. Another interesting group to study within this regard, actually, is called Coven. And a lot of people had never heard of them. They emerged at the tail end of the 1960s in that psychedelic counterculture era when music in America was heading in that direction. And they've got a front woman called Esther Dawson, who calls herself Jinx Dawson. And in an interview, I've got an excerpt from this, which again I show in my public talks. She openly admits to being descended from one of these important Illuminati bloodline families. The Mayflower Compact Society that came over to America in the days of the founding communities there. She's got direct connections into Freemasonry, into American politics. And in this interview, she's quite openly saying, this is who I am and this is where I come from. So it's obvious that that band was promoted because of who she really was. And they were pushed to the forefront in those times. And what they used to do in their live stage shows was openly perform black magic rituals, satanic masses. And on the cover of their best-known album, Witchcraft Destroys Minds and Reaps Souls, you've got the band dressed all in robes in some sort of temple with candles and stuff and skulls all around. And on the back cover of the sleeve, you have a depiction of an actual satanic black mass taking place with a figure lying down on an altar and all these robed figures standing around performing this ritual. So this is very dangerous stuff for people to be involved in if they don't know what they're dabbling with. And I'm sure Shane Lynch would agree with that. But I think these groups did know exactly what they were doing. And they were a part of that kind of world and those spiritual belief systems. And it was just a part of their overall culture. I would say that that stuff does not belong in music and so-called entertainment and so-called popular culture. It has no place in any of that stuff. Music should not be about the open pushing of witchcraft and sorcery and dark occult rituals. It's supposed to be all about fun and entertainment. Yeah. And most people labor under the delusion that it is. But when you do the research, you come to discover that it's all used as a vehicle to push all these ideas, all this mind control, all this social programming under the guise of entertainment. It's been going on forever, and they've been stepping up the game big time in recent years.
Yeah, I've come across, I think now we've talked about it before, Madonna. It was actually seen that she was like taking part in some ritual, and she came out dressed as a witch, and she had her, we'll call them backup dancers, but they were dressed up in witch outfits. And I was listening to a podcast there in the last couple of years, and there's this American girl that was really studying it, a bit like yourself. And she reckons that Madonna was this high witch, and she's passing the baton down to Beyonce. Do you think anything is that is?
She's actually referred to as the high priestess of the industry. Even within the music industry, that's the nickname that others have for her. And people think, oh, it's just because she's been so successful and she's been around for so long. No, I would argue that she actually is regarded as a priestess. And when she takes part in these rituals, she knows what she's doing. Either that or she's been mind controlled into doing it. So she's definitely got previous in these things. She's come out dressed as the transhumanist robot from the 1927 movie Metropolis. She's come out in ancient Egyptian garb and Babylonian Sumerian garb in those sort of rituals. There was this one where she kissed Britney Spears, openly on the mouth, and that was intended to signify that she's passing the baton to her, effectively, as the new pop princess. I mean, this was many years ago now, probably 20 plus years ago, but it was in Britney Spears' heyday. And shortly after that event, Britney Spears had loads of hits and was doing world tours and stuff. And so she'd been selected as the most prominent pop princess of that time. And these days, of course, it's Taylor Swift. For whatever reason, she's been selected as the one that they're promoting the most. There's all kinds of polls that you can get where they detail the most famous person in the world. I don't know how you arrive at that sort of conclusion, but Taylor Swift has topped these polls. She's apparently more famous than Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin or anyone else. So how do you get to that kind of level just through being a pop singer? You certainly don't get there yourself through hard work and crossing your fingers for good luck. So Madonna is descended on her mother's side from a great many people, an important long-running family bloodline, French-Canadian roots. So her mother's name was Madonna Louise Fortin. So she took her first two names, and her father's name was Tony Ciccone, and she took his last name, but she's basically from this Fortin French-Canadian bloodline. And one way or another, genealogists have done this work, and they can demonstrate through the family trees and such. She is related to a whole load of famous people. George Bush, Dick Cheney, Bush's own vice president, they're cousins. Barack Obama, Obama is a cousin of George Bush and Madonna. Brad Pitt, Tom Hanks. Now you know why they've been elevated to such high ranks in Hollywood films, because they come from this bloodline. Justin Trudeau, Justin Bieber, Celine Dion, Ellen DeGenerate, as I call her, Lady Gaga. So Madonna is a cousin of Lady Gaga. And when Lady Gaga first emerged, I remember people saying, oh, she reminds me of Madonna. Yeah, they're cousins. That will be why. So Lady Gaga was like a modern day reboot of Madonna from the 80s. They've just been using Gaga as a vehicle for getting occult symbolism out there and pushing agendas and such, because Madonna's a bit past it now. Doesn't like to admit it. She still wants to make out that she's in touch with the youth and she's all funky and cool, which is a bit tragic, really, at her age. But they've always got new generations to wheel out, so it's never really a problem.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future of music going, Mark? I saw I came across this the other day. It was an AI song by 50 Cent. I think it was Many Men, and it was it's you saw that as well, John. It's like
it was 2 days ago.
Reimagined as a 60s, reimagined as a 60s blues song or something. And I'm ashamed to admit it, but it's actually really fucking good. And
sounds horrific.
Yeah, it's actually really good. But I suppose, where are they going to need these artists in the future?
Well, yeah, that's a good point, or a good question, because the way things are headed, if the agenda keeps rolling on without anything to stop it, we're going to get to the point where, well, we're already there, where songs are written by AI. I mean, up until recently, it was committees that used to write songs. So famous songs by the likes of Rihanna and Beyonce, if you look in the songwriting credits, there's like 10, 12 names there, because it was all composed by committee. So one person would come up with a melody, somebody else would come up with a hook, somebody else would come up with a couple of lyrics, somebody else would come up with the overall theme, and they'd all pull it together and come up with a song, and then give it to Rihanna and say, get out there on stage and sing that. But these days it's AI doing that. So AI is working out where a hook is needed, where you need to put the bridge, where you need a bit of a catchy melody, where you need a bit of la 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 and all this stuff to make it even more catchy. And it's producing songs on that basis. And then they're giving it to these puppets and instructing them to perform it as much as any kind of performance is left. You've also got auto tune, where they plug a vocalist's vocals into a computer software program that makes them sound like a gibbering robot. And this is part of the transhumanist AI agenda. They're trying to merge humanity with technology and making those ideas seem really cool to young people. So they just accept that, yeah, technology is great, man. This is the future. This is where we need to be. So if things are allowed to continue on their current trajectory, it doesn't bode very well, and there's not a lot of optimism there, not a lot to look forward to, because songs are going to become even more artificial, even more bland, even more disconnected from true artistic creativity. And new generations, not the one we have now of young people, but the generation after them, is going to be entrained and conditioned to think of that stuff as music, when realistically it cannot be described as anything of the sort. No artistic creativity whatsoever, just algorithms and computer programs. So it's either going to go that way, or the occultists, the controllers, are going to push things so far in that direction and become more and more blatant with everything that they do in terms of satanic dark occult symbolism at all these shows and festivals and in all the visuals, and in terms of watering down the musical content and introducing more technological components, more and more auto-tune, more and more AI, that young people in their large numbers are going to say, we've had enough of this. This isn't music. This is straight garbage being served up to us, and we're not having it. We demand better. There is great music out there. People just don't get to hear of it. It's being made. There's great dance music, there's great hip hop, there's great reggae, there's great rock music, acoustic stuff in all genres. There's empowering, conscious message music. It's got something to say. It can enrich you in your life, and it sounds great as well. It's just this stuff is kept out of the mainstream. It's not signed to any of the major record labels, which is probably a good thing. But you can find it if you go hunting on SoundCloud, Mixcloud, various other platforms where people post their music. So my hope is that young people become more discerning. They learn to spot the ways in which they're being manipulated and mugged off and mind controlled and socially engineered. And they say, no more of this. We're not having it. We reject this stuff. We want something better. And if large numbers of young people were to do that, then the record companies would really start to suffer because nobody would want their product. It's difficult to see that happening, if I'm honest. Difficult to imagine. But that's the kind of revolution, social revolution, that I hope for. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, if I'm going to be honest. But that's what I'm working towards in my endeavors. And many other people are as well. There's some great producers, great music makers. They're putting out wonderful content. And there's some great podcasters, broadcasters, public speakers, authors who are putting this information out as well and just doing what they can. And we can't really do any more. You can only do as much as you can do. You can only do your best. Nobody can expect any more of you than your best. But as long as we're all doing our best, our consciences can be clear however things pan out. We'll know that we did what we could, and we just have to keep doing it.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, as you said, you hit the nail on the head. Once it's been pushed out by the likes of yourself, that really is doing the research. Once that pushed out onto the people, because I'd even see it myself there on some posts that would, like, there's another example, there's thousands of examples, as you know, but there was one with The Weeknd there back from a few years ago, again, live on stage, and it was like, it was just like a flash on the backdrop of Satan. You had to really slow it down to see, but in the lettering, it was clear as day, Satan in the LED display. But like, even from a post like that, in the comment section, it was full of hundreds, I'd say even thousands of posts saying, I rebuke the devil, I don't accept this into my life, And these weren't just, I suppose, chat bots or fake pages. I actually clicked into some random ones and you could see these were proper profiles, like, you know, so it seems to be that the general consensus is people are starting to wake up to this shit, like, you know.
All right, well, that's encouraging. And what I love is when I go on a YouTube page of some mainstream artist, and it might be a video that contains just what you've said there. Another example is Beyonce's song XO. For no reason whatsoever, there's a split-second subliminal featuring a demon. You know, you've got to be really quick with the pause button, but you can see this demonic entity that's just cut into the video. So young people, girls predominantly, watching that video are having that put in their subconscious mind. And it's encouraging when you scroll through the comments and people are saying, what the fuck is that doing there? You know, why is there a demon in this video? What's going on? You know, why is the music industry blatantly pushing Satanism? And people are noticing this stuff. They're learning to become symbol literate. So when their favorite artist flashes up a hand signal, they're on it. They notice it. They know what it means. And when you see it on mainstream platforms, so not like some truther podcast or whatever, but just a random TikTok post or a random YouTube channel, when you see people noticing this stuff, that's a great thing. And I've said for so long, wouldn't it be cool if there could be a trend which emerges on TikTok whereby young people try to outdo each other in terms of how much satanic symbolism they can spot in pop music output. So somebody says, I saw a pyramid in this video, and somebody else is like, wasn't just a pyramid, mate. There was Baphomet in there. There was bloody Satan in there, you know, and then somebody else says, well, what about this video? Did you notice this? A subliminal at 2 minutes, 13 seconds, you know. It would be great if you had a whole community that were trying to like make it really cool to be streetwise and savvy to this stuff, not to be manipulated, not to be mind-controlled stooges that have all this stuff perpetrated on them, but to become really smart and spot all this stuff and say, you know, you can't get past us because anything you do, we spot it. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if this kind of global awakening, if you want to call it that, is sort of has been orchestrated, and it's maybe a slow, controlled awakening that they want the public to have. And last Christmas, I think it was last Christmas, Kim Kardashian released a song. I think it was on YouTube. My wife sent it to me, and I nearly fucking crashed when I was watching it. But it was the darkest shit you've ever seen. I think she was singing a Christmas song, but she's going through this house, and it's difficult to describe it, how dark it was. And at the end, Macaulay Culkin, she looks like she's about to give Macaulay Culkin a blowjob as he's sitting in his Santa costume. And when you read in the comments underneath it, it was just like people were dumbfounded at what they were watching, and they were kind of almost demanding that we need an explanation for this. Why would they do this? You know?
Yeah, well, that's good. What's your view on why they would want a controlled awakening?
Maybe just to push us into another direction in the sense that maybe I think I saw a meme where we're going to be moved from a smaller cage into a larger cage. I don't know. It's just, I feel like when I started my own supposed awakening in 2010 when I found out about Building 7, and I think a lot of the people that I would have credited back then for quote unquote waking me up, I don't really trust them now. The likes of maybe Alex Jones, who has said he's got family in the CIA. I mean, even for a brief moment, I thought Russell Brand might be one of the good guys, you know, and that's embarrassing to admit as well, you know. And even though, you know, I'd still tune into maybe the likes of Joe Rogan, these guys, I can't imagine a world where someone's going to be paid $100 million and are still going to be on the level and still, you know, will not say things that aren't really their opinion. Maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't trust Jones. I've never trusted Brand, and I think their roles are as gatekeepers. So they are on the payroll, and they're out there putting some truth into the world. So a lot of what they say is demonstrably truth. It can be backed up, there's evidence, but a lot of what they put out there is bullshit and diversion as well. And that's the important part of what they do. That's their role, to divert you with nonsense. So yeah, if the controllers are as vigilant as we credit them as being, and they've taken over pretty much every walk of life, every aspect of organized society. So they control politics, they control banking, finance, government, mainstream media, and entertainment. then they're going to want to have put their gatekeepers in prominent posts, particularly with the explosion of the internet. They don't leave anything to chance. They put their assets in as the biggest rock musicians, rock stars. They put their assets in as some of the biggest DJs. They put their assets in as all the big business leaders, Bill Gates and bloody Musk and Richard Branson and all these. So they're going to have done the same when it comes to so-called truth and conspiracy culture. They're going to want their guys in there as well, steering people off down certain desired directions. So I can see why they would have done that.
Yeah. I mean, like if there are, secret societies that have been going back thousands of years, royal bloodlines, the same, are they really going to let some, billionaire misfit come along and disrupt their plans to enslave the whole world?
Well, that's right. And this is what I often hear about people's favorite bands. I get this all the time when I'm in conversation at a conference or something, and somebody will say, oh, yeah, I love your content and I'm absolutely on board with everything you say. I know the music industry is controlled. I know there's Satanism everywhere and all the rest of it, social engineering. But my band weren't a part of that. And it will be some really big band like Pink Floyd. People don't want to hear it about Pink Floyd. People might say, oh, the Rolling Stones weren't involved in all that, or Queen weren't involved in all that. Of course they bloody were. You think any band could get to that level of prominence without having been handpicked as chosen ones? Impossible. As if the occult controllers of the industry are really, really smart, but they just didn't notice over the course of 50 years. They didn't notice this band slipping through and getting really successful and putting their own messages out. They just didn't notice because they're dumb like that. No, it's a dumb comment to make.
So, Mark, are you touring at the moment yourself?
Never stop, mate. Constantly on tour.
Will we see you in Ireland anytime soon?
Well, I'd love to come to Ireland. I've been there a few times. I've spoken at the Open Minds conference in Waterford, run by Trevor Ivers. I've done that 3 times, I think, probably 3 times. But other than that, I did a gig in Dublin once, but I'd be very happy to come and do some speaking engagements there. Most of what I do is in England. I just go up and down the length and breadth of the country every weekend. Occasionally I do some overseas stuff. I was at Liverpool in Serbia a couple of weekends ago. But yeah, it never stops. I'm busy out and about spreading the information, and that's the way I like it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on. Got in touch with there last month. You got straight back to us, and yeah, it's been a real privilege to talk to you. If you, I'll keep an eye on your calendar anyway, and the next time you're in Ireland, we'll make the drive and we'll come meet you, buy you a pint.
Sounds good.
Where can people find you, Mark? I know we'll post all your info in the description, but is there anywhere else that you want to say where people can find you?
Well, the main website is djmarkdevlin.com, and there's links there to all my various activities. You can get all my books on Amazon if you want to go down that route. I've had some problems posting books to the Republic of Ireland. They seem to get seized by customs. No problem with Northern Ireland, but when I try and post them to Southern Ireland, it's a hassle. So I do recommend to people outside of the UK just to get the books on Amazon, to be honest, because it's just the easiest way. And my YouTube videos are on 2 channels. I've got one channel which has my music industry stuff and another channel that has all my God and consciousness stuff. So you can find me on there. I'm on Rumble and Odyssey as well, and Spreaker. And as I say, you can access all of that information via djmarkdevlin.com.
Brilliant. Mark, thanks a million. I know you're a busy man and really appreciate you taking time to talk to us. It's been madly interesting.
No worries. No worries, guys. Thanks for getting me on. Cheers.
Cheers, Mark.
Okay.
Take care.
All the
Take it
best.
easy. Bye, Mark.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.